So we were at the shack.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And we heard a lot of different opinions about the shoreline fault,
yes.
about the possible ground motion from the shoreline fault,
yes.
and what it actually might be connected to,
yes.
that are not the same as is in this shoreline report that the NRC has accepted as
right.
as truth or as a foundational document,
as the best is the most technically defensible upper bound magnitude. Okay, so
at this point it's known.
At this point, that's known.
Known.
Okay, so they are different processes and different purposes in the two things. The RIL specifically was looking at a deterministic assessment of an individual fault, and doing an independent.
Would you explain what deterministic assessment?
Okay, so deterministic is based. It's a scenario-based assessment. So you look and you say, okay, you've got this one individual fault. What is the largest defensible ground motion that could come from this fault? By contrast, what you guys went to for the shack workshop is it's a probabilistic regional model that's being developed using more modern techniques. It's using our state-of-the-art modern techniques. So the outcome of that process is intended to be the model which is used to give us the best estimate of hazard, the center, body, and range, right? So the best estimate plus the level of uncertainty for the ground motions from all of the faults at the site. Now, one important thing to understand about the shack process, and I have lots of information, so let me send you home with some of it to read, is that process, particularly the workshop that you guys attended, which is the alternate interpretations workshop, that's what workshop 2 is all about. It's about getting everybody with alternate interpretations in the room, getting them to explain it, having the different probe and defense. It's really the fun workshop, because you get to hear all the approaches. So the point of that is to really get all of those alternate interpretations on the table. And another important part of it is for people to truly understand how defensible some of these things are. Now, you used the word opinion, and one important thing to understand
is what?
Opinion.
About
just generally using that there are a lot of different opinions expressed, because one important element of that process is to separate judgment from opinion. Right? And the difference being that judgment has a clear line of defensible reasoning from evidence to claim. Opinion you just throw out there and you can say whatever you want. So
I meant to use the word judgment.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
But I think it's important because there were at times a lot of opinions that were expressed which were not supported by what necessarily was seen. And so that's one of the elements.
From a judgment standpoint.
Yes.
Whether you were doing a deterministic analysis or a probabilistic analysis of the shoreline fault, why would you not look at a multi-fault rupture in conjunction with the Hosbury?
We did. We did look at it.
The report says you didn't.
No, the report says that we did look at it and we didn't find it credible.
Oh. And that's judgment.
And we laid out all of the evidence for it.
So when Dr. Hardeberg at the shack, the discoverer of the shoreline fault, stands up and says it would not be prudent to rule this out.
Well, first of all, okay, so what would prudent mean? Prudent means if you put in that as a larger magnitude, the ground motions would go up because it's conservative, right? Well, first of all, I want to say that was an opinion that was expressed.
That was an opinion? That wasn't her judgment?
No, because she was saying what's prudent or imprudent, and it has to be about the technical defensibility of any particular element in the model. When you increase the maximum magnitude, the ground motion actually goes down. When you increase the maximum magnitude of the shoreline fault within the model, the ground motion goes down. Because you have a limited budget of slip and energy, right? So you have these two plates that are moving relative to each other, right? So there's some maximum slip rate that's happening that has to be accounted for on all of the individual faults. Okay, so you can't just have this infinite amount of slip. So if you take slip from one fault, you have to put it on another fault. Additionally,
Annie, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if you knew that you were being recorded and if you were okay with that.
I'm okay. I mean, how could you miss it?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you felt comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what its purpose is.
Yeah, could you let us know what this is for?
So we can have documentation of what was said.
Okay. Are you posting it online? YouTube? It's going to be on YouTube just so she knows where she's being posted.
Defer my turn.
Okay, hi. I'm LARA USELDING with the NRC. I just like to know
Laura.
when people are filming.
Last week, and I
John
sent an
GEESMAN.
email telling you I'd be here with my camera. I'm David
No,
Weissman.
I didn't
Yes,
get
did.
that.
I don't know if it went to Laura.
And you responded. And I asked
But
you
at any rate,
How do you do?
so let me finish.
Oh, I let you know we would be taping.
Okay, so you have a certain amount of slip. So you either have to take that slip and move it to a different fault, which means you're reducing the hazard on another fault, meaning that if you don't have evidence for it being on this fault and you're reducing it from another fault where you think there is evidence that that slip is occurring, that's not conservative. That's inconsistent with technical judgment. And you have a certain amount of energy that's being put into the region, right? So all of that energy, the energy in has to be balanced by the energy out, okay? So you either take the slip and you put it on another fault, right? So it's because that is all a zero-sum game. Or you take that amount of slip and you actually, when you increase the maximum magnitude of that, it's called a magnitude recurrence distribution, right? So we know how many, the relative occurrence of different magnitudes of earthquakes. If all of a sudden you're adding a lot of big magnitudes into this distribution, one of two things has to happen. Either you have to reduce the slip to the rest of the earthquakes, because you can't just keep adding energy to the model. Or you have to make that model so that the overall occurrence of any particular magnitude drops. So what that means is if you increase that maximum magnitude in your model, you have fewer of every different magnitude. And that's why the numbers go down.
So the people in Fukushima can feel very proud of the fact that they participated in a statistically extremely unlikely event.
But the point is, it wasn't that statistically unlikely. They don't use this approach in Japan.
Oh. Well, that explains.
So did them.
And they also, while we do, they also don't look at multiple fault rupture. Well, we do. However, we don't just add it in when there's not the evidence to support it. Now, in the SHAC process, when you look at all of these different interpretations of the data, what ends up happening is you try and develop the model to get to the center, body, and range of all the interpretations. So what you see in the end is a logic tree model that would account for any of the interpretations that are technically defensible. And they are all weighted by how well the model actually supports that particular interpretation. So it's very likely that you might see that particular interpretation in the model with some given weight.
So,
which is why it's different than a deterministic analysis.
in terms of items that you don't include when there's no support, you didn't run the numbers for your scenario 5.
That's right, because the staff and the consultants working on it did not feel it was a technically defensible interpretation.
Now, I understand
Why?
that
Because not only is there not evidence for it, there's negative evidence.
I understand that was your conclusion or your judgment.
Right.
But you really mean they just never ran the numbers? They never had the curiosity to see what
there's
that
not
would
a they,
produce?
it's me. I personally am responsible, and I personally did this work.
Okay. And
So I'm not talking in the abstract.
You just didn't open that door. You said, this is so implausible. I'll include it as one of my 5 models. In fact, I'll even put it on my poster.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to run the numbers on that.
I ran already from high to low, even before any of this happened. The day that PG&E came in and told us that they'd found this thing, I ran a suite.
So you already knew.
Yeah, I have an idea, but it's all of it. It's whatever is technically defensible.
And you knew that within the day that PG&E came in?
No, I knew that running what all of the different magnitudes at that location, I knew what those numbers are. Because if actually everyone should know that I knew, because the first drill that came out provided all of that as a sensitivity study. So all of that information is available.
My recollection is the NRC regional staff was extremely critical of PG&E for not running that new shoreline fault information through the 3 design basis earthquakes included in the license.
No, that's a completely different topic. That has nothing to do with this.
Would you repeat the question again, John, please?
When PG&E first turned in its shoreline fault report, the NRC regional staff said this was a violation of the license because PG&E had failed to evaluate the shoreline fault information under the design earthquake scenario and the double design earthquake scenario.
But that was one element of what he said, but that makes no technical sense. That makes absolutely no technical sense.
It makes a legal point if the license says you're supposed to do it.
Except that he put that idea forward, and that idea was put forward, and it went to all of the different people that are responsible for the different elements. Part of that came to me, but there was no technical basis for that. What was decided in the end, someone else can answer this better than I in terms of the licensing stuff.
We'll get questions for folks. If you have specific questions, maybe part of our poster session, if you have a specific question, we've got people from our headquarters or the region here.
Right.
But
well,
yeah,
the way
let's
you
not
just
let,
express
I
it
feel
was
like
really
let's give
incorrect.
Annie
I'm
here.
trying to determine why the report ignored that.
And we definitely want to answer questions for you.
But this has absolutely nothing to do with licensing or operations. All this is hazard. This is just hazard.
Hazard doesn't exist in the abstract.
Yes,
this
of course
stuff is
it does.
here, but it's for a purpose.
Yeah.
Science is for.
But the earthquake happens regardless of what's built on it.
That's right.
But if you
so
have
we
6
need to
billion
find-
pounds of nuclear waste, it makes a difference.
It does, but not to the Earth. The Earth
Well,
is going to do what the Earth is going to do.
Wait a second, and we want to know
And that's
the
what- that's-
maximum that the Earth is going
Right,
to
and that's
do.
my job. Is
And we
that.
don't believe
This
that
is
the
all, This is
maximum
all
was
something
done.
completely
If we could
different.
let Annie take individual questions. I don't think,
Yeah.
I think having her on stage here with the camera is probably kind
Yeah,
of
it's kind
taxing.
of-
So if you guys want to maybe wait and get with her
happy to
one-on-one or
answer
something
your
with
questions,
the
but I'm a little
question.
I do want to
thought that this
register
was
the
really
observation.
Yeah, I don't want to be
Well, I'd like to hear
recorded.
my lawyer's comments on this.
It's hard to dispel from this interaction the notion that this report is a whitewash of the shoreline fault. Now, if you'll take me to your licensing person, I'll pose the questions to your licensing person.
Would you prefer that we just put this out and we didn't have a chance to come and ask me
But
any
you've already
questions?
established. You already.
Mr. Giesman can't be here this
We
evening.
have found.
This is a single individual fault.
I may not
that
have
we did
recorded
an
tonight's meeting because you said you'd be
analysis on
recording.
that they're going to use for operations.
So I don't need to.
We still have this entire process ongoing, which is far more